a whole AI swept away essentially an entire 2 decades of infrastructure and replaced it with the best programming language that exists, the English language. And essentially, the joke on the street is like the best new language for programming is English.
3, 2, 1, go!
Welcome.
This is perfect.
Another episode, Rush Hour Podcast. I'm TW. This is Justin. We're just two non-technical tech guys giving you the latest buzz, some free game, and we have a really special guest here, Simon Hill, who Justin and I worked with when we were at Tagged. Now, If We Now Meet group and part of a merger and acquisition. But Simon was an incredible friend and co-worker of ours who really. I mean, in my time there, I was there, 5 years? You pretty much did everything at the company, it felt like. But the last part, I think, which we'll discuss today, is you were the head of innovation. So there was like a lab that essentially, If We created, that was like, how do we push the edge? How do we create new products? How do we find the next thing? And Simon was an incredible leader in this, and came up with some incredible ideas. And today we wanted to talk about something he's working on in the AI space. But, Simon's been at AOL, obviously the Meet Group and Tag. Is it Rakio and Tari Labs? I mean, you've been...
the IoT sprinklers. Yes, and then lately blockchain companies.
So yeah, Web3, now obviously AI, Internet of Things. You've got a ton of experience in a ton of different fields. You've kind of jumped into technical, non-technical, product, non-product, UX design. Like, you've kind of done it all. So this is going to be a joy for our listeners to hear. So your expertise and your I don't know, your knowledge and your accent. Let me just keep it real. Your accent is incredible.
It's just going to make everything sound more legitimate. So it's perfect. It's great for us.
It's a very lovely introduction. Thank you, gentlemen. It was my great pleasure to work with you both. And I've been trying to work with you guys ever since, especially with you, Justin. My seduction powers there have not been enough. But
we'll talk about it offline. We'll talk about it.
It's a pleasure to see you guys.
We're glad to make it happen. So let's start it off. I mean, Justin, we're talking AI is all the thing, and now you're in this space. We've got you here. Justin, why don't you lead it off for you?
Yeah, I mean, what we try to do on the pod is like give people really practical advice and insights. And like TW mentioned, Simon, you just had such a tremendous background, not only across a lot of different disciplines within tech space, product, doing some marketing, data analytics. Like, you kind of done it all there, but like, you've actually been a practitioner. You've been an operator. You've been a guy getting his hands dirty in the space, not just high level, kind of in the ivory tower thinking, but actually operating and executing against, different strategies and things that you've done. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting within the context of AI to talk about, it's a lot of buzzy stuff going on. There are some innovations. Would like to get your perspective on, where you've seen AI integrated in a way that actually can like help operators succeed, right? Kind of taking away the fluff. Where's the real meat of what AI is driving now? And, we can kind of provide you an answer that we can dive deeper into that.
Yeah, well, I am currently working on a startup that is very AI focused, but it never began that way. Not to talk about my startup in detail, but the way I have always run into new technology is because you're trying to solve a problem and the tech isn't good enough. It's just very simple. Tech isn't good enough. Back in the day, we did machine learning. It used to be called machine learning to try to solve various problems. So I think there are two sides to think about, kind of why, very practical meat and potatoes approach to AI. One is that there's a whole class of problems that really were totally intractable before. Image recognition, being able to, a whole level of what would be called NLP, natural language processing tasks, classifying things, generating answers, what we used to call knowledge graphs. So we used to think about having massive knowledge graphs and then use vector databases to try to query them. A whole AI swept away essentially an entire 2 decades of infrastructure and replaced it with the best programming language that exists, the English language. And essentially, the joke on the street is like the best new language for programming is English. So, um, and I was trying to solve a particular set of problems, and AI was able to solve them 10 times better than they were able to be solved before. And that was the difference between having something that had product market fit and something that just wasn't good enough. And so for me, it was a tipping point. And then on the other side, there's just a lot of software that's really boring and difficult and complex to write. If I'm giving an example, maybe on the IoT side, where I've worked, like there's a lot of software to do with trying to figure out, let's say something really boring, like what are the water restrictions that I have in my area, and then how do I turn that into something that I can use to modify my my watering schedule so that I am complying with the watering regulations and also watering my plants. That is that problem. No one will give you enough money to solve that problem using traditional methods. But that's a 1 cent problem to solve with AI. And so companies like the ones I've worked for, like Ratio, which are in the IoT space, can offer a whole suite of solutions that essentially automate the creation of software. And the adage is AI is eating the world. We used to say software is eating the world. Now we say AI is eating the world. So the other side of it is just like a whole class of stuff that used to require the writing of software just only now needs an English sentence. And so those are the two areas that I find it most useful and practical.
So are you using them in terms with like a Chat GPT? Or are you using a B2B product? Like, are you using a proprietary product, or how?
Well, so I have most experience actually using Chat GPT's API products and also Google's Gemini platform. And my philosophy there is, in fact, and it was a sort of a strategic decision with my company, was that we knew that AI was going to move so fast, because the other problem is it moves so fast that it can seem overwhelming. But the thing to assume, and well, at least I assume, is it's all essentially already a commodity. And so what you need to do is you need to position yourself on top of the platforms that exist, and just assume the prices are going to get cheaper, that the platforms are going to get better. So the app I have, like when I started out, and it was probably 2 years ago, maybe 3 months after Chat GPT came out, OpenAI first released the API. It cost 50 cents to decode a journal entry, because this app, the thing I created was a journal app. It cost 50 cents. Like no one's gonna pay you a subscription high enough to afford 50 cents per post in this thing. But now it's like 10 cents and 8 cents, and I can easily see it going down to 5, and that's over a period of 2 years. Meanwhile, the quality of everything has shot up massively. So it used to be like DALL-E 2 generating images, which were horrible. Those horrible, like, I don't know if you remember them. Now, DALL-E 3 is pretty decent. And then across the board, there's just been a gradual improvement of all the models. I have literally had to do nothing except wait for the prices to come down, for the qualities to go way up. And that is a good position to be in. And I think a company that's positioned itself in a practical space for AI, that's the right feeling to have. It's just like, I don't really have to worry about this space, because I'm just going to, we talk about raising all, a tide that raises all ships. I'm just going to be on this tide that raises, as long as I'm not going to be wiped out by AI, which is another question. But if you're providing something that isn't likely to be destroyed by the AI revolution, and we can talk about that, then I feel like OpenAI is working for me, and I'm just benefiting from the network effects and the improvements of the technology.
Yeah. It seems, there are a lot of conversations in the space about where the value accrues. We've talked about that a little bit. So it seems like, based on what you're saying, that the value, at least maybe within the consumer applications, but maybe even B2B as well, that it kind of like that value will be at the application layer, right? If you think of kind of like with the AWS of the world, or the like kind of Google and what Google search is able to do now, these AI, apps that sit on top of this, these LMs, which are getting more efficient, getting better over time. That's going to get cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. Everything else, as
Yes.
long as you can build like a really good UI, then
Yeah.
you can get a lot of value
If
there.
there's a if there's a defensible product concept, and by that I mean, so in the case of journaling, for example, which is just a very practical, boring example, it's very private, um, and it's it's unlikely that a consumer-facing journaling app will be something that you'll just use ChatGPT to create, because for all kinds of reasons it plugs into, potentially plugs into many, it needs to know a lot about you. So I think privacy is one area where, we'll see that is a defensible moat, and it's also very niche, so it's less attractive for the big companies to go after things. But if you consider, let's consider an IoT company, like Alexa, or um, like a smart home company, that's very concerning, because all of the hardware is becoming, there's thread and matter and thread, which are the new hardware protocols, which mean that almost everything can talk to the smart devices. You don't need any software in the middle. All you really have is your brand and your customers. And is that enough when, someone can simply uh, connect say it's a sprinkler controller and it's watering your lawn? You can connect those valves in the near future directly to ChatGPT or any of those services and have them control it. And like, you don't need to write any software, so you can tell them what plants you have and your landscape and all that stuff, and it will just know how much water it needs and how much water it's had and the weather, and all these things will just. And you got to ask yourself, how am I still gonna own the customer? How am I gonna defend the quality of my brand, and charge my advertisers what I'm charging them, if I'm going to get essentially, disintermediated by whatever the AI, the big AI in the cloud becomes, that we all start talking to when we finally throw away our Alexas or Google Home or whatever it is you have.
So then, when you walk us through the process of, like, you were thinking of creating this journaling app, which we'll talk more about. But at what point did you say, "Hey, AI is the way"? Like, what was you said there was a tip. What was that thing that made you say, "All right, AI
Well, I
is
had a
the
very
way"?
so it wasn't actually a journaling app to start with.
Okay,
It was more, it was something crazier and more amazing. But I'm not sure you're. So what I was always trying to do was find a way for people um, uh, to translate the world that people live in into a story that some piece of technology would extract the meaning from, the hero's journey, the moral psychology, and construct adventures for you, however they may manifest in your world, to undertake, either alone or with friends. And the problem I had, that I could never solve, was, in order to understand what someone in order to decode what someone is saying in terms of the helpers, the victims, the adversaries, the missions you're on, in order to be able to organize all that into epics, to extract the threads from your life and
right,
decode it into the little story nodes, and figure out whether that's like arriving at a new place, or entering the dark forest, or longing, or a trial, or being fooled. These are all things that needed to be primitives in the system that I was building. And so I had, I corresponded with professors in cognitive science and kind of narrative science, which does exist in some universities. And I was using the state of the art in machine learning, which required ungodly amounts of like manual tagging. So I would literally sit there, and sort of transcribe the plot of shows like Scandal or The West Wing or whatever it was, and then I would feed it all in, and I would manually tag it, and try and get these and then I would like try and like describe my day, like having an instant with my boss, or chasing my cat, or whatever. And it was just totally horrible. It just wouldn't work. The results were rubbish. And and even though they were state of the art, but then with when generative AI came along, which had been trained on all of culture, all of narrative, all of folklore, all of myth, it already had that knowledge built into it, and it could easily, you can, as you probably know, you can give it something that you did, and then you can ask it to pull out the roles that people played and the abilities they had and the traits they displayed and what characters they were most like, and it will just give you the answers. You don't even have to train it. So that was the night and day realization. Once I realized that it could do that, and that really all I was doing was writing English sentences, wasn't even in code. Like I could literally delete 20,000 lines of code that wasn't working and replace it with 10 lines of code that was 100 times better than anything anyone in the world had ever come up with to solve that problem until now. So it was it was such a, I mean, it was like it was like that scene in the Avengers when Tony Stark invents time travel and he just like collapses on and says shit. And his his 2-year-old daughter is nearby and calls him out for swearing, but it's like it I mean, it wasn't time travel, but it seemed that big it seemed a leap almost of that magnitude compared to toiling for, and I've been trying to do this for 10 years to solve versions of this problem. So it was an immense breakthrough, and then I off and running. I was able to go to market with this thing within 6 months after.
So walk us through well, we might as well just get right into Fable a little bit. Um, Walk us through the sort of, you said you've been working on it basically for 10 years. What is sort of the genesis of like your thought process? You're a very creative and thoughtful person, but like ultimately to find product market fit, there's this massive journey. But at the beginning, what was sort of the entrance into this
Well,
like for you?
yeah, the um, there's sometimes a distinction that's made. I think it was the philosopher Isaiah Berlin made this between foxes and hedgehogs. And hedgehogs are people with like one idea and they just stubbornly stick to it. But foxes are people with like, who don't, not that opinionated, and they just see the opportunity. And so as a product manager, I try to be a fox in that I don't really, I don't have a horse in the race of this, whatever the founder I'm working for, whatever product they care about. I'm very data driven, and it's whatever the market opportunity provides, and that's the job, right? But when it comes to my own projects, I'm a total hedgehog, and that like and it started actually when you and I worked together. Um, if you remember, I was on the algorithms team, and we did a horrible job of trying to find better ways to get people to connect.
Right.
And in fact, we just mostly got spammers and scammers to connect better, and not actually human beings.
Scammers need love too, though, and
Yes.
They
in fairness.
do. They do. The and so I went on a deep rabbit hole tour of all of the social science around human attraction, and I got very fixated on this one idea, which is that what you can do to make someone who hates you love you. It was kind of a simple thing. Is that how do you get like, because now it's very tied up with politics and ideology. It doesn't matter. Normally, not someone who is unattractive, but like someone who, for some reason, has values that you hate. How would you get those two people to love each other? Which is sort of a dating problem. Like, how would you get
Mhm.
two people at the opposite end of the ideological spectrum to love each other? And that was like the problem statement of my life for some reason, or at least that time. And I, the idea that I tumbled to is you sort of have to save them, like you kind of have to save each other. It's how you get to love each other. And if you watch movies and TV series, you'll see that there's this constant back and forth between the your adversary who then comes and saves you and then becomes your friend, and then you form a little group, and then there's a constant back and forth between the adversary boundary and the in-group boundary around the hero's journey and kind of saving each other. And I this was also come off the bat of like I'm a very intellectual person, and I've come to the opinion that actually arguing with ideas, rational discourse, was completely useless in any of these contexts where you have ideological differences. And now there's a huge amount of social science and psychology around that. You know, the best book I read at the time was Jonathan Haidt's book. You know, of course, I'm going to blank on Righteous Minds, and which is kind of why good people hate each other is essentially the book. And so it turned out actually there was a whole body of now I think quite mainstream, but then quite fringe moral psychology, sociology that was being surfaced in the popular press, and so I was gobbling all of that up. And so then that became the problem. Like, well, how do you do that? And so I had tinkered many different ideas. Like one idea was a Twitter bot that scanned Twitter and it looked for people who hated each other but had an authority figure that they both loved. And the idea was that we would contact the authority figure and they would, like Snoop Dogg or something, but it's someone who was higher authority than the two figures. And then Snoop Dogg would drop a mission in that these two other people who hated each other but loved Snoop Dogg would have to fulfill together. Now, nothing ever came of that, but I just toyed for many times with how to do it, and it's fraught with a lot of problems. Eventually, I tumbled to the idea, well, some kind of journaling app that can track your moral psychology, so what you love. So the app that I built, Fable, it has a thing called the Soul Ledger. And the Soul Ledger, whenever you do something, it tracks how much love you're exhibiting towards it, how much courage or how much hate, shadow. And so it builds this kind of calculus with every entry that essentially maps out your entire kind of moral psychology and moral disposition to all of the things and people and groups in your life. And that was the key. The Soul Ledger, and actually in the company that I'm for Fable, I'm calling Soul Ledger Technologies because it's so important. And also I'm I'm looking ahead to Web3 because I hope that one day this becomes kind of a blockchain application. But that was the thing that then allowed. So then that allowed Fable to create missions that were going to create reconciliation. And so there are these three basic gamification elements: love, courage, and shadow. And then there is this third one called soul. And soul is essentially reconciliation. And so the way Fable works is, you write this really short entry about your day, draws a lovely picture, but then it extracts the all of these different moral dimensions of what you're doing and ties it to the other people in your world, and then creates prophecies and missions that are all about generating reconciliation between yourself and the things that you hate. Now, anything from as mundane as your cat to, who you'll find that pets go constantly in and out of this boundary between beings you hate and beings you love, depending on the little micro heroes' journeys that going on between them vomiting on your couch and snuggling with you when you go to sleep. And that's the other thing I discovered is that this logic was very fractal, and although it's sort of absurd to think of walking to the supermarket in a snowstorm as a hero's journey, it really structurally, though, it can be broken down that way. And even for some people, for example, if they're handicapped or they've broken their ankle, it actually is a hero's journey. It's just a matter of context. So that's the other thing I discovered, is that this was very fractal, and that you could roll up people's lives into different levels with the very mundane, which was easy for them to enter, whatever happened. So I'd been toying with all of that and trying to make it happen, and until generative AI came along and essentially solved all the problems that I had, all the NLP and machine learning problems that I had.
Now, was your mind around content like, hey, there's everybody is a story. I need to create content, user generated content. Like, is that kind of how your brain operated in terms of thinking about this, or was this because
No,
yourself?
not at all.
Okay.
No, I fear I'm sort of an infantile man-child, because when I tell you my answer is just that I am I feel that my life lacks a lot of meaning and I'm very bored. And I consume a vast amount of fantasy and other entertainment. And I just felt like uh, entertainment was trying to fill this gap in an imaginative capacity of filling people's lives with meaning vicariously and also being fun and entertaining.
Right.
And that, so I was really, what I was trying to do is, how do you have an experience of your own life that is as meaningful as you sometimes feel your favorite movies and stories are? And that ultimately comes to, how can you experience yourself as enacting the myths that you love, and the myths, the modern myths, um, like, uh, what, in video games like Kratos, or in The Last of Us, Joel, whoever your hero is. And then there are ancient myths. And as you guys might know, I have a deep background in Egyptology and comparative religion and comparative mythology, and I studied all that stuff in college. So I've always, that's sort of been the kind of the intellectual bedrock of where I've approached this. But it wasn't about how do I generate content, for example, to engage people. It was like, how do I give people an experience of their own life,
Right.
as if they're a protagonist in their own story? Because wouldn't that be incredible? That would be so meaningful. And then on top of that, how do I propel them to do actual, to actually become better people without it being some kind of moral or religious ideology that I'm foisting on people? Because Fable doesn't really care what your ideology is. It just knows that there is shadow in your life and there is love and courage in your life. And then if you constantly recycle the shadow into adventures, you will just create personal development inside people, and also entertain them and make them feel incredibly meaningful. And I've had, in the beta test I've run, I've had two separate users have told me that it's better than going to therapy, and it's very close to what like cognitive behavior therapy is doing. It's putting you in the driving seat as the protagonist, and it's reframing your life where you're an actor and you have choices. So Fable is constantly doing that. And with these various flywheels that are also trying to take you on a moral journey of your own, while entertaining you along the way and creating connections with other
Yeah.
people.
Where
So I'm curious about that demo of early beta testers and users who you created maybe some type of sticky product for. What is that persona? What are those people like, and how have you adapted your product
Yeah,
roadmap or features over time to serve
sure.
them?
Well, I didn't know, and when I talk to people, they gave me different opinions, including yourself, Justin. Um, but largely, people said, well, it's only going to be gamers. It's only going to be people who like video games are going to be interested in this. Then it was also, no, it's only going to be like the wellness, the mental health crowd. And then another was, no, it's going to be like this super niche journaling crowd who like do journaling in real life, which is the smallest TAM you can imagine. I Meanwhile, I was thinking, well, I don't care what it is. This is kind of just the form factor. I need to get the input. I can imagine when things are, ambient enough, you won't have to write anything, and it'll just be more of a kind of, I'll open it and it'll know, because it'll sort of be observing my life, and you'll have given it permission to read all those streams, and you won't need to write anything. And if you don't need to write anything, then is it a journaling app? It's not. It's something else. So I ran. So those were the three basic categories. It was gamers,
Mhm.
mental health users, and slash personal development, and journalers. So I ran initially just Facebook ads, the classic front door Facebook ad targeting, those with different messaging. And I found like journaling, contrary to what people had told me, actually has a massive TAM, and it's because everyone is, and the click-through rates and the reach was great, and it was very cheap. It's just like, everyone knows what journaling is. Whether or not you like it or not, nearly everyone has tried it. And in fact, Fable mostly appeals to people who like I never succeeded in journaling. Like Fable tells me I journal an average of 7 times a week in Fable, but I've never journaled before in my life because it's so boring, and I haven't got time, and I haven't got bad handwriting, and I don't enjoy any of that. So I feel like the other thing I was trying to do, I was going, well, if we can bring the friction down low enough that journaling becomes something that's fun that everyone can do because it's really simple, and it's like you get so much more back than you put in, then this TAM can be actually quite large. Whereas the gaming was the most engaged for sure, but it's much smaller and more expensive to acquire. Mental health was a total bust. It's just very hard to advertise for a mental health, I think, app brand, unless you. I mean, I think you have to pay a lot of money to establish that brand in order
Yeah.
to become attractive to you. You can't just put a shingle up and advertise yourself as an alternative to cognitive behavior therapy, and then people are just going to try and download your app. Even though I think there's a big market for those things, which really speaks to the what I ended up what I ended up just focusing on was what users ultimately told me the app was in the first 6 months. I would interview, so after I'd gotten 30 subscribers, because the other thing, by the way, you're asking for tips about strategies. One thing I decided to do, because it was so expensive, is to focus on monetization off right out the gate, because
Yeah.
like it isn't like Web 2 where you can just throw money and get users and figure out how to monetize them later. Even though the prices are coming down, it is ruinous to try to create, unless you've got lots of dumb money or smart money, or you just have lots of money to pay for the acquisition costs and then for the usage. The operational costs are so high that I was forced to solve the monetization problem. So I did that outright, no pun intended, right out of the gate with a paywall that actually turned out to have fantastic conversion. And it seemed like this was something people were very willing to pay for. And so I had gotten maybe 30 subscribers. And after about 6 months, I was feeling like I, did not know what direction to head in. And I just did the thing that you always do as a product manager, which is when you don't know what to do, talk to customers, talk to users. They will
We talk about
always,
that all the time. So
I mean,
important.
it's just that they
So important
always
to do that.
look, it's like they are the miracle cure for all kinds of ills. And every product manager talks to customers all the time. And so many problems are just dissolved by talking to customers. And although there is a danger that, your most avid initial customers, they may be a small niche that could limit you in the future, I think that is not as more serious as not having a well-identified customer base that you can satisfy really, really well and gives you great reviews and understands your product. So I've always, believed, and I think it's a fairly well-trodden principle in product management. I believe even Peter Thiel, in 0 to 1, he talks about you need to find the market where you can be a monopoly. Like even if it's very small, you need one. You must find that first, and then you can build on top of that. So that would have been my strategy. And they all told me, because I was going to actually strip out a whole lot, because a lot of people tell me, like, too many features, Simon. You need to take away all these features. It's like, that's just too complicated. Now, in my heart, I believe they're all very important. But I'm also very aware of the old saying, the cobbler goes barefoot. The product manager is really, that although he's very happy to go and slash everyone else's sacred cows, just won't let anyone near his own. And I do feel that way about a lot of features. But then I talk to customers, and they actually mostly agreed with me that it was a journaling app, and that these features that that I thought were very important. And so I decided that it was a journaling app, and I've reorganized everything around that. And I think it kind of works great, even though I think the future, the thing that I'm currently raising money in a Kickstarter for, actually expands it much more into an immersive gaming kind of world, because you're going to be able to, more like kind of Foursquare meets video, choose your own adventure, because you're going to be able to turn, your local coffee shop or the bus stop that you take the bus to, you'll be able to put up even like QR codes and convert those into things that are playing a role in stories that you are currently working through in the app. And that there's a story editor where you'll be able to create stories. So we're going to be launching with 3 that we're curating, which is Winnie the Pooh, that just came out of copyright. SCP Foundation, I don't know if you know that weird, disturbing kind of, it's a community created wiki of weird and disturbing creatures. There isn't much story there at all, but they're all like really powerful psychological archetypes. Like there is a creature that I think has been lifted by Doctor Who and other shows, that if you can never remember having looked at it, and so it just wipes your memory. So no one knows where these things are. I think in Doctor Who they were called the Silence, but they have their origin in this
Hmm.
open source. It's a uh, uh, copyright Creative Commons community, and that's very psychological. So the kind of missions that Fable will create will be like encounters with your unconscious and with trauma and deep stuff. And then lastly, Lovecraft, because that's also out of copyright. So there's going to be kind of the Cthulhu mythos stories, which are going to be a little bit more entertaining, not quite so much therapy. Um, and you can create. So I'm building a story editor that allows me to create these, and then I'm open sourcing that story editor so that other people can come and create these worlds too, and then sell them in the app essentially, or offer them for free, or whatever they want to do, collect royalties. So it becomes
Cool.
a platform for a creative platform for immersive entertainment. And then I'm talking a lot here, but I partnered with Prodigal Entertainment, who are they do Kickstarters, but they do a lot of theater, TV shows, a lot of stuff around Douglas Adams. They produced Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. They just launched a book on Douglas Adams, is an audio book about Douglas Adams. They have they tell stories in lots of different media. So they're transmedia, and they have the connections that I need to take what started off as a journaling app into a realm where we can have tie-ins with more AAA IP and potentially video games. And there's also going to be an API platform. So I'm going to open up to developers who will be able to create sort of immersive experiences. Ultimately, I'm looking at kind of the personalized metaverse as sort of the platform that we're creating. Because what Fable does, it's like in Westworld, where the park is decoding the guests. If you remember that show,
Yep.
Fable is sort of decoding your life and knows enough about all of the things and people and the morality of your life that it can create rich narratives, immersive, augmented reality, VR, video games, custom personalized video games. There's a whole like massive market that goes way beyond journaling that becomes available. And I feel like the journal app is like the book was to Amazon. It's just a way to get started.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's interesting because while many people are creating content that's really for the masses, this seems like a great avenue for you as a individual to create custom content for yourself.
Indeed, and one interesting thing I've discovered is so there's a lot of AI hate at the beginning, because another thing you encounter with these sorts of things is like if you have an AI image on your ad and you have all the AI haters on Facebook, I have reviews saying this is copyright theft, it's art theft. But if you actually talk to people, it's like no one has enough money and enough time to like hire a studio to constantly make the movie of their life every hour of the day.
Right.
So like that's absurd. Uh,
Right.
so our Fable is very committed to figuring out, and especially working with Prodigal Entertainment, because they're very, they were actually rather sort of, they also were worried, and Kickstarter was worried because they've done so many Kickstarters. We were able to get them to consult a little on like whether or not this app would be something that would play on Kickstarter. It might not, and apps are very iffy. And being an AI-driven thing, they are even more skeptical. But it comes down to this fundamental thing that the stance of Fable and AI is not. It's not a robot that is time saving. It's an augmentation of yourself. It's a prosthetic. It's the expansion of self. I often comment, I don't know if this will resonate, but I sort of resent the fact that I have to chat to an AI rather than it's simulating my thoughts. And I actually have like a meta prompt in the various, in Claude and Chat GPT, which is do not frame your answers as if you're talking to me. Frame them as if I'm talking to myself. Because that's really what's happening, and it's much healthier. And I don't know if you know like the works of people like Jared Lanier, You Are Not a Gadget, Who Owns the Future. He was one of the fathers of VR and is a vehement sort of anti-social media, but kind of visionary AI VR and musician. That's really the spirit of AI that he talks about, and I very much try to embody that. And one way to say it is that you get into an awful lot of trouble in civilization if you frame AI outside the boundary of the self and start making it about something else that you're talking to. Of course, we talk to each other in our own heads. Like that's you can think of thinking as the null case of communication. Talking to yourself is sort of the origin of consciousness. But we have made this very lazy little kind of slip where we have framed all of AI as if it's an automaton that's there to do work for us. And of course, that's obviously a massive part of it. But really, it comes down to us, and as an augmentation of of ourselves. What Steve Jobs, when he described the computer as the bicycle of the mind, AI is the I don't know what to call it, but it's consciousness expanding, its ability expanding, and I find Fable is very much meant to do that. It's meant to be an artifact that has that as its core purpose, which is to expand your human potential as much as possible.
Walk us through the Kickstarter. So you've got this Kickstarter now for Fable. What is the goal? What are you guys trying to build?
Well,
we'll link it in the description for everybody listening.
Well, as you guys know, I've never been someone that anyone has jumped up and down to invest in. I mean, I'm just kind of a jobbing product manager for most of my career, and I did try the usual accelerated program thing. Like last year, I wasted maybe 6 months applying to Y Combinator and Techstars and doing all that stuff that some of you guys are alumni of. No one, between the weirdness of myself and the fact that I'm a hedgehog, and clearly I have this idea that I've been trying to bring to life, that makes me a very unreasonable sounding person to invest in, because you'll say, well, this guy, if his idea doesn't work, he's just got one idea and he won't listen to the market, he won't listen to customers, right? And that is true to an extent. I am not willing to, while the degrees of freedom I feel are massive, I'm not willing to give up on a lot of the fundamentals, and I think that is just a turnoff, and understandably so. So I think I'm kind of an outlier, but that led me to have to find another way to try to bootstrap the thing. And I'm at the point where I have, I've spent enough money of my own and done enough ad tests, and I have product market fit, meaning I know I have a $17 subscription cost, and then I probably have around a $300 3-year LTV, and that my operational costs, I have probably 60 to 80% gross margins. If you just give me enough capital to plug into marketing, and I'd really like to find a co-founder. So another thing that I've was in the beginning, because I am a technical PM and I can write software and I can do product management and information architecture and UI and design to an extent, this meant I was very self-sufficient. But I'm telling you, any of you out there who do that, it ends up actually biting you in the ass, because you end up going so far that you've lost all the people that might join you on your journey. They're now coming so late that you now have to go much further than you ever would have to have done before. It's literally to become essentially an almost viable company, to be able to, and then you essentially have to hire people rather than get people who work for free, because you've taken the journey away from them. And that has happened to me, and it's it's shitty. I didn't see it coming, but it was very clear when going through all the incubator proposals and that I went through, and I probably did around 8 or 9 of those. It was very clear that was a problem. It always comes out in the team. They're very obsessed with the team, right? So what's your team? And that's good. Well, actually, I don't have a team. Looking for a co-founder, looking for group, and so I felt like I don't have access to any of the normal sources of capital. And since I'd gotten so far, Kickstarter seemed like a reasonable place to begin. And what I'm hoping is that even if the Kickstarter doesn't do, amazingly well, meaning it doesn't have to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, it will boost my subscriber count up to a few hundred. It will allow me to run bigger, better marketing tests that will, I feel like if I can get to 100 subscribers or 200 subscribers, then then I just feel like that no one will care anymore about me, the person, and they'll just look at the business and they'll go, yes, this has got a track record. Been working at it now for 2 years, and there's enough trust and validation that that I will get some angel funding too, and that will be enough to kind of get me for profitability within a year, and hopefully through that journey also find a co-founder.
Justin, what do you think? When you're hearing this journey that Simon is on, like what goes through your head in terms of like what's needed, what's next, what's cool?
Yeah, no, I mean, what resonated with me most of what he was saying earlier around trying to monetize as quickly as possible and trying to figure out actual paid subscriber base, and that's like the real product market fit now, especially when you're raising like venture capital.
Right.
You kind of need that earlier than ever. Like when we were kind of growing up in Web 2, as you mentioned, Simon, you could just have audience like, oh, I'll figure it out down the line. That does not exist anymore. No longer in the ZERP environment. We're in this AI-enabled environment where teams are much smaller, and they're that's kind of what folks are looking for. So I think that like that piece really resonated in terms of, hey, if you're trying to do something like Simon, try to monetize as early as possible. Take a real hungry approach to trying to figure out the business model, and still be willing to put some skin in the game and talk to customers. I think that's good. I think that and I'd be curious, kind of from a marketing perspective, to kind of understand the rigor which you've done some of the tests. But I think that like the content play and really understanding how that works in terms of driving liquidity into the product, and really these platforms, particularly for like performance marketing, have gotten so good at kind of finding your audience that the remaining white space is just being really good at making creative and then just optimizing toward that. So if there's anything to kind of focus on, I'd probably be there, but I'm probably Sam's figured a lot of this out, so that's that's probably something that's very top of mind for what he's doing now.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had gentlemen, or ladies of your caliber helping me, but I have done all right figuring out on my own so far, and with the help now of this production company that has more of an entertainment lens
Yes.
and connections, like they're reshooting my Kickstarter video, which is terrible, and so I'm hoping that we'll be elevating all of that in the coming weeks, which would make a big difference. Although I still have high performing ads on Facebook's always trying to make me throw more money at them. That just also is the other thing I would say, when you don't have much money to spend, and when not much money, I'm like $20 a day is like, but it takes a really long time to run experiments.
Right.
But it turns out this whole thing is a marathon anyway. So when you first launch, you go, ooh, maybe I'll be a millionaire in 6 months. But 2 years later, you realize, oh, this thing is just like, it's incredibly slow. So it's okay to do very slow experiments. And so I've done that. And the other thing that I've also avoided is I've avoided making a lot of noise. Not that anyone would pay any attention to me if I tried. So maybe it's a virtue. But I think a mistake a lot of companies make and entrepreneurs make is they throw something out there and they get a lot of signups and casual users, and they can't really learn anything. So I was because I have made that mistake many times in my career working for other people. I was very fanatical about like running secret experiments, because like I only would get 10 signups a day, and I needed to know if it was statistically significant. So I if you're only getting 10 signups a day, like you could, I only want to run that test for 3 days or a week to know whether I have a signal. And you can't do that if you've got all kinds of random shit coming in through SEO and stuff. Fortunately, I acquired the skills of a data scientist, so I'm very good at getting signal out of very small data sets, which is a very handy skill for a product manager who focuses on innovation and new product and go to market. Because but you have to I don't know what to call it, the marketing hygiene needed to learn a lot on a very small budget has to be very high, and so that was one other recommendation.
Quick question, like when you're just kind of getting brass tacks, like tackle things, maybe some of this may even be helpful for you. In terms of like asset creation, when you're doing your ads experiments, are you making them yourself? Are you using tools? I'm just kind of curious about that, because There are some tools like Creatify you may have heard of, or Icon.me, where you can create like AI UGC ads that are really good. We put in brand content. It'll make some stuff, and I'm wondering if that will help you to kind of like
Yeah, I would like
scale
to
out at
try.
least the yeah,
I haven't used anything more than Midjourney and DALL-E 3 to make
yeah,
images.
Right.
Also, um, so I would say like I made two images that are so striking that they have uh, really outperformed anything else I've tried.
Very
One
cool.
is this dragon girl, which is I've used everywhere. The other thing about reusing creative is like again, I don't like to change too many variables at once, so I don't like to mess until I'm in growth mode where I'm just trying to figure out how to grow. If I'm trying to learn other things, I like to try to keep the creative uh, if it performs well as a kind of baseline because I know I don't have to consider that as a variable, which means the experiments can be much simpler.
yep,
I had two, I lucked out, I would say, on Midjourney with two really striking images. One is a girl kind of in a hoodie with a dragon kind of snarling around her and she's looking at her phone. And the other is a little girl skipping into a dark forest with with Fable. The way I actually got the image was I asked it to be like the 2001 monolith, but with the app. They're really striking images, and like they get tons of likes. Like the ads are getting tons of likes on Instagram and Facebook. So I've just clung to those two
yeah, yeah,
lucky those lucky coincidences. But the downside is like like I don't I'm too afraid to try anything else because I feel like I have to spend so much more money and time to actually figure that out. Um, and so I haven't, but I would love to.
And when I looked through the Kickstarter and your video, my thought was, this is really this would be really cool to see mine, but also like I'd be really curious in terms of like influencers and people I follow what theirs looks like. I think that's where my head immediately went, which was like cool for me to kind of do and see what mine looks like. Maybe my kids, whatever. But
Mm.
I was also like, hey, imagine you discover a new person online, you want to learn about them. These influencers now pop up left and right. The guy drinking cranberry juice on a you know whatever
that
skateboard.
longboard, yeah,
Yeah, like imagine like him having one of these, and then you can see the story of how that came to be. Like that's
Yeah,
where kind of where my head is,
right.
which is
Well,
like very cool.
there was one thing that I tried to get Justin very interested in, uh, which has worked out reasonably well. So this is one of these things that's born of necessity. So with a journaling app, you can't read people's journal entries. Like I actually physically can't do that. And
Right.
like I could retrieve the God seed phrase, but mostly you can't. Um, but there are so many points of failure and it's so complex. Like I know there must be 17 different models at work. Like how do you QA a system like that? It's very, very hard. So what I have is a kind of a virtual universe on a development environment. I have 7 kind of personas, different people, men and women, old and young, and they are because one of the things you can do with Fable is you can sort of be okay. I'm going to be Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars stories, and it will like create prophecies that will sort of align with your life and make you sort of go through. It will tell you when that soccer game that connected with the scene you're currently on, where Luke Skywalker has to raise the ship from the swamp or something like that. So it's doing that all the time. It's kind of an allegory engine. So what I have are these characters going through what is a sort of semi-humorous, mundane life, and but if you know the story they're following, you can see that it is sort of an allegory for Star Wars or The Handmaid's Tale or whatever it is that I've programmed in. And then they generate these images and copy it. And then what I've done, my Facebook presence is just like every week I post like a week's worth of those things, and they're mostly kind of funny because it'll be like Yogi Berra is assisting me in my homework, or that's a very old reference, but or Noam Chomsky is helping Batman defeat the his tax man, and so it creates these humorous, or Harry Potter or whatever. They're funny, and you can see that the ones that are funny get a lot of engagement. And then sometimes the funny ones I boost. And I get
Hmm.
the same level of engagement from those as I do for ads. I wouldn't say that I get more engagement necessarily, but I am converting those things. In the process of doing it, it forces me to read all the output and consider like, is this good? Like,
Yeah.
and that's how I tweak the system. Is I essentially follow the imaginary lives of these virtual people going on their myths, their bizarre stories, and then I can see like when the image quality is not up to snuff or there's some glitch or whatever. But then I turn that into not UGC, but I turn that into marketing content a little bit.
Very cool. So what are the sort of next steps for you? Obviously this one is a big one, with the Kickstarter.
Yeah,
But
so I'm hoping that I'm hoping that the combination of the Kickstarter and maybe some interest from angels that it helps to galvanize will just allow me the luxury of being able to work on it full time. I mostly work 10 hours a day for a different company that pays the bills. So it's
right,
very much uh, uh, I am not able to work very much on the project. I mean, it's a kind of a reasonable spot that I'm in that I did quit my job like last September, and I did kind of work on the thing for about 9 months solid, which is where I did most of the work, and then I've mostly been trying to find product market fit through tweaking. But I'm hoping that this gives me the momentum I need so that I can focus on just growing it, because I really do believe that a combination of being able to focus on it full time and I know 250,000 in investment for to keep me going for a year and plus marketing expenses and whatever that will get me to profitability very fast within a year. That's what my business model says. What my ad tests say is possible. So that's what I would love to be able to do.
exciting times.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
You're
And
invited. You're invited to come.
well, I mean, listen, whether I was to come fully on board or not, you can always hit me up anytime for
I know
advice and
you
insight.
gentlemen are
That
great.
you know that
That's
that you know that oh, that's always a standing offer. But go ahead, TW. You're about to. I
no, no.
want
I
you
was,
to be
I
able
was
to close
just going
out.
to ask you what are your thoughts moving forward for Simon in terms of um, next steps and
Yeah. Um, one of the things where I'm not sure you are now is like kind of growing this social. I just haven't checked it out, but like growing the social channels and your audience there. I think that could also help to bring down your customer acquisition costs with the customer journey in terms of how people are now deciding whether to download apps or not, which is a lot about social discovery and uh, perception and FOMO and things of that nature. And I think relative to some of the tests that you're doing to drive top of funnel conversion, there may be some other things. And again, I don't know necessarily the size of kind of the followings across the platform, but of low spend that you could do on the Instagram, like through Meta, probably more Instagram, but also on TikTok to grow kind of like following there as well, so that if people are kind of doing this customer, so you have to spend a little dollars there as opposed to just pure conversion. But I think that can help
sure.
long
Yeah, and I've
term
totally
cut
failed
down some of those
to.
costs.
Yeah, I've leaned in hard to not doing it because I sort of suck at all of that stuff, and I'm just going, well, if I can find a path to product market fit that doesn't require me to have cracked social, I'm sure there is a huge social opportunity, and
absolutely.
it's and a lot of rich potential, even though it is a journaling app, so it has sort of the like the dating, as the downside of something that's supposed to be private. But there are hooks like the missions you can invite people, the geocache cards that are going to be part of the Kickstarter. You'll be able to tag any place, and so you go to a busy coffee shop, you'll be able, like you used to do in the Foursquare days, you'll be able to open Fable, and if you can tie tagging a place or an artifact to a particular scene or event in a mission that you're doing, if you want to like recruit people, so you can essentially become a nexus for multiple storylines intersecting, where everyone might be
That's cool.
like their version of going through the story of Harry Potter or Winnie the Pooh, whatever it is, might be, licensing aside, might be very, very different. But that that's the story we love, and that we have related our lives and this place and this artifact playing this role, in a similar kind of similar structurally. It's I feel like very powerful, and I haven't really even tapped that yet. So I'm hoping that
Yeah.
will be the key to social.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we're at an hour of your day. We appreciate you jumping on to talk about
Not at
this
all.
stuff.
Thank you, gentlemen.
No, we'd love to have you back in the future here next steps and what's up going on. Looking forward. We'll drop all the Kickstarter information
Yes.
below.
Thanks. Just that link.
Yeah. We'll throw in Simon's LinkedIn, and if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, leave them below. Otherwise, appreciate your time.
Thanks, gentlemen.